past 3 weeks have been some of the most trying for Nigeria as a nation, as the Buhari administration struggles to deal with the fallouts of a popular young people's protest against police brutality. But as it turned out, the rest of the world was also watching the development with keen interest. Consequently, as the protests continue to wane in the wake of a dastardly attack on the protesters in Lagos by suspected members of the military, a number of governments, individuals, and diverse interests on the international scene have been speaking up in condemnation of the attacks and Nigeria's poor human rights record. Fears have been expressed in some quarters that perhaps without knowing it, the country could be going down the familiar route of self-exclusion, of becoming, as it were, a pariah state. Well, joining us to offer an informed opinion about all of this is Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, a former Minister of External Affairs and a renowned teacher of politics and international relations. Welcome to the program, Professor Akinyemi. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Nice to be with you again. I wish the topic were a bit more pleasant, but we take the world as we meet it.
Well, Prof, let me be more specific. Professor Akinwande Bolaji Akinyemi, and I'm referring to a video that you recently released. Maybe we'll get to that in due course. But first, the big story today is the Nigerian military through 81 Division here in Kufu Abayomi in Lagos, saying that they were invited by the Lagos State governor to provide security at the Lekki Tollgate Plaza that became the major center for youth protests. But on October 20, things went out of hand. There were reports of shootings and killings. 81 Div is insisting that nobody was killed and that the military was just acting in aid of civil authorities. And all morning, we've been saying, who is telling the truth? How are they handling this whole crisis? And, we'd just like to have your thoughts on events leading to that crisis and how government has handled it so far, and whether or not the government, military, Lagos State government, are just gaslighting Nigerians.
Well, look, Arise TV has correspondents all over the place. We, the public, depend on your station as well as other stations in the media for our information, to inform us accurately, to put things in perspective, and to educate us. Now, why are you asking me to try and sort out all these conflicting news? The governor said, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't invite anybody. 81st Division now says they were invited. But of course, then there were initial denials about the military being there. We saw the videos, and now there is a panel sitting in Lagos. Frankly, the panel has a difficult job. I do concede that. But I wish they had really started with the shooting at the toll gate rather than the petitions filed by people who have issues with SARS. I am not denying that people have issues with SARS. That's what touches them most. But in a way, given the national and international attention that is focused on Nigeria now, if I were the chairman of the panel, I would have simply dealt with that issue first before moving on. But, I mean, the panel itself knows best. So I don't really know who to believe, honestly. I've read the letter from the 81st Division. It's a bit conflicting. It's a, if you try to deconstruct it, frankly, you end up being confused. So let me just say that I would rather just wait for the panel to tell us the truth, bearing in mind that Pontius Pilate once said, "What is the truth?" I hope somebody will tell us the truth. But let me say this within the international context. Nigeria is both lucky and unlucky. Nigeria is lucky in the sense that our own crisis has come in the season of protests. Black Lives Matter protests all over the world. Protests in Thailand, protests in Chile, protests in Kyrgyzstan, protests in Guinea, and of course our own protest. Now, this means that for the world, it will not perceive Nigerian protest as an aberration. It will not regard Nigeria as being a bad boy within the international system. That's the good part. The bad part is that after 10, 12 days, there were shootings in Nigeria. Thailand, demonstrations, protesters have been going on for about a month. Kyrgyzstan has been going on for about 2 months. And there have been no shootings. So you've got the awkward position then in which Nigeria finds itself. My own reading of the international community's assessment of Nigeria is that they don't believe the protesters started the violence. And I think they are right in that. They believe that the protesters were victims of what happened. And gradually, the government itself has come around in a rather convoluted way of admitting that the protesters at Lekki Toll Gate were victims. So, I think the international community itself is probably still waiting for that Lagos panel's decision. And I hope they are not going to take all their time about it, because the American election is just in 7 days. The world is going to move on. And if we want to keep the attention of the world on this issue, the panel in Lagos should hurry up with its procedure and its process.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. I want to go back to what you said. You mentioned Pontius Pilate. Even the Gospels go really out of their way to exonerate Pontius Pilate and not blame him for the crucifixion of Christ. In fact, he washed his hands of the matter. But till today, centuries later, wherever the Apostles' Creed is said, Jesus Christ suffered under Pontius Pilate. Culpability in matters such as this, even the perception of culpability, tends to stick to individuals and to institutions. You cannot get that stain off. But will it stain Nigeria in terms of our standing globally? Nigeria got a lot of praise through the mediation of our former president, Goodluck Jonathan. He came back and was able to report positively what he was able to do in Mali, for example. Will this affect our standing?
Oh, no, it will not. It will not, simply because Nigeria, for all its warts and all, is still perceived as a regional player that has sufficient capability to impose his views and his will in West Africa. So in fact, sooner or later, we are going to be involved in what is going on in Guinea, following, again, the rubbish which they have just gone through, which they call presidential elections. Let me remind you that, in fact, one of the contradictions which we still teach our students happened under Abacha. Here was a brutal dictator trying to reintroduce democracy in Sierra Leone, and the world allowed him to do so because the objective in Sierra Leone was what the world wanted, and so they were prepared to let him get away with it. And you often get this kind of contradictions and conflicting issues in international relations, unfortunately, where the bad guy will often go ahead and do the right thing internationally, although not domestically.
Right, sir. Thank you so much for your insights. I'd like to ask you, amidst all of this, the president gave a speech. And in the speech, he did talk, to the international community, and he made some comments. I'd like to know your read on that. And I'd also like to broaden it generally in the African context by also asking, is it becoming one too many? I mean, if you look at what happened in Mali recently, about a youth resurgence and, taking of power and the military and the likes, and Nigeria too, the NSAS protests, about bad governance and probably looking at the future. Is it time for Africa to start thinking strongly about the youth population? Because when you look at these two countries, median age is like 19, 20. The leadership age is averagely in the 70s. A lot of people don't understand the juxtaposition and how you can really effectively, do things for the young or understand the language of the young people.
You've put several issues together. So let me start with the youth issue and hope that I don't forget. And please, if I do, remind me of the earlier issues you've raised. You see, this youth issue, I don't like narratives that start in the middle. Nigeria, at different times in its history, had always been ruled by the youth. The first generation of leaders we had, Sardauna, Balewa, Awolowo, Azikwe, Ameno Kano, were all in their 30s when they started. Balewa was prime minister when he started around the age of 35 or thereabouts. Sardauna was in his 30s when he became premier of the North. Chief Awolowo was in his 30s when he became premier of the West. And Zik was in his 30s when he became premier of the East. Then came the coup. How old was Ironsi? Probably in his early 40s. But when Gawan came in, he was in his 30s. When Murtala came in, he was in his 30s. I know this because I used to crack a joke with him that we're about the same age, sir. And of course, typical military man, he would tell me to shut up, You are a civilian younger brother. And that makes all the difference because I was 33 and I think he was 34. And when Obasanjo came, well, we don't know really how old General Obasanjo was during his first coming, but he probably was in his 40s. Let's just put it that way. Let me skip a few of of them. In 1999, when we came back to civilian rule, how old was Donald Duke? How old was Tinubu? How old was Segun Oshoba? How old were the governors? They were either early 40s or mid 40s. Now, you're not going to tell me that they were really not used. It's only in what I would say in the past, well, in this dispensation, that we can then be talking about old people ruling Nigeria. But to say old people were holding on to Nigeria, I saw an analysis that was done just this week. The president of the Senate, this is his fourth term in the Senate, he came in as a member of the National Assembly, early youth. The same thing with Gbajabiamila. He came in early youth, in his early 30s, to become a member of the House of Rep. So maybe the period of Obasanjo and Buhari should be regarded as an aberration. I think that is the point that I'm trying to make. It's not as if from the beginning up till now, old men have been ruling Nigeria. And Nigeria has not really been an exception. Let me make that point. Trump and Biden are in their 70s, late 70s for that matter. So the fact that we are being ruled by people in their 70s now does not mean that come the next dispensation, the youth will not have a chance to come into governance in this country.
And the part of my question that talked about the president's speech and what he said to the international community, what's your read of the president's speech? I want you to do an analysis of your read of the speech in general.
I don't think it's helpful when a head of state decides to demonize the international community and tells them basically to either mind their business or that they don't know what they are talking about. Because invariably, because of technology, the international community knows what he's talking about. I will not be surprised if the United States, through its satellite, has videos of what happened at Lekki Gate, toll gate, that night. I remember once during, I believe it's the first Gulf War, and the American chief of staff telling NASA to turn the camera of one of their satellites around because he wants to see precisely what is happening in Iraq in a particular area. And they did. Real lifetime, he saw it. So I won't be surprised. So usually when the international community gets involved, it is probably better, even if you are going to disagree with them, to do so in a civil way. If I were writing that speech, I wouldn't have written it that way. Let me also expand my comments a little bit to cover the lack of civility in the speech by, or in the press conference, or whatever you want to call it, whatever was released to the press anyway, by the Chief of Army Staff. You know, I have been dealing with military officers of general level since 1970. I didn't serve under General Gawan, but I interacted with him. I interacted with General Murtala Mohammed. I interacted with General T.Y. Danjuma. I interacted, of course, with my boss, General Ibrahim Babangida. I never came across, I'm used to, let me just put it in a rather polite way, I'm used to a kind of civility in the speech by the generals in the Nigerian army. I found the tone of that speech offensive and off-putting. So in a way, even if you are trying to put the views of the military across, there are ways you could do it without offending your readers or your listeners. As a professor of political science with specialty in international relations, and as a former minister of foreign affairs, there's a particular style of speech that I am used to. So I was put off again by that speech. And I really do hope that if you don't want to lose your audience, if you don't want to antagonize your audience, and Nigeria should know that it is dealing with the international community as well as its domestic community. You are dealing with educated and civilized people. Dude, let those who represent us or who speak on our behalf watch their language.
Well, Prof, very quickly, I think we should talk about the way forward. You've talked about the truth. What is the truth? And we're hoping that the various panels of inquiry that have been set up across the country would make some effort in that direction. Some state governors are also talking about compensation. Southwest senators are saying that Lagos deserves special support from the federal government. What, in your opinion, are the things that we can do to move beyond this end-SARS crisis and the aftermath?
Well, Ruben, let me put my own view this way. Since, I started this biblical, illustration, end-SARS was and is more than just stomach infrastructure. It's more than just bread for the stomach. end-SARS has gone way beyond. And I believe from the beginning it was more than just the behavior of a specialized unit of the police. If it were, the moment the IG, the Inspector General of Police, and the President said they were disbanding it, the boys and the girls would have gone home. end-SARS, like, again, Black Lives Matter, had become a question of good governance. Good governance that will yield results and address the concrete issues, not just of the youth demonstrating on the streets of Lagos, but the concrete issues that face the country. You see, if end-SARS were that localized, then what was happening to the looting in Adamawa, the looting in Yola, the looting in Jos? People are angry and people are hungry all over the country, irrespective of the attempt to ethnicize the struggle, which I believe is an unfortunate development. we've paid a high price in this country when ethnicity is brought in order to demystify a genuine protest movement. So, to me, the way forward is this. Number one, look, I'm sorry if I'm now starting to sound like a broken down record, but please look at two documents. Look at the Uwais report on electoral reform and look at the 2014 National Conference report. Because in these two reports hang all the laws and the prophets. We addressed the issues confronting Nigeria. You know, if members of the National Assembly think that people don't know what they are talking about, let them ask why are homes of their former members, their former senators, their former speakers, why have they been vandalized by, if you like, the angry people? Why? If they think this thing is ethnicized, why has it moved from Lagos to Aba, to Calabar, to Yola, to... So, the National Assembly itself better sit up because now they know that the poor people whom they have ignored, the ruling class has ignored all this time, they know where to hit when the opportunity for them comes. So the way forward is this. Employment, to me, will then become number one issue. I will even leave the political ones behind. Leave them aside. Employment. Do you know something? There was, and there is a video going around where a young lady sat in a chair and said, "I'm your president." And she now gave one by one things she was going to address. If she were president, listen to that video. She was talking sense. In fact, I thought, wow, this young lady must have access to the Uwais Commission report. And Ruben, I know you have access to that report because I believe you were in government when we submitted that report. I was a member of that committee. We told government that the United Nations said Nigeria needs 1.5 million policemen. We have only about 350,000. And we were recommending that the police, that the Nigerian government should employ 750,000 more policemen. I agree with that. The lady again called on the Nigerian military to employ more military men just to soak up the unemployment, but at the same time to provide security for the country. What we've seen in the past 2 weeks is that we don't have enough men in uniform to guarantee security in this country if every part of the country decides to blow up. We don't. So you serve two purposes, employment and security. And those are the things you could do immediately. Then the political issues. Restructuring can come in. And what is restructuring? I mean, people tend to think, oh, he's taking power from the north and giving it to the south. No. We've just seen how every governor was scrambling around in the past 2 weeks. If you allow each state to have its own state police, you wouldn't have had a situation where the street took over, even governance, in almost every state. So, you know, restructuring is that. You allow things to be done at the local level, which should be done at the local level. So really, I mean, because I don't know how much time I have on your program this morning, those to me will be the way forward to at least give the youth, give the streets the impression that you have not set up all these panels to buy time, but that you are really, genuinely and seriously interested in addressing their issues. Let me say this, I mean, I may be wrong, and I hope I am wrong. I think Nigeria has just 2 weeks to address these issues before the youth come back onto the streets.
Indeed, sir. It does appear that the protests were suspended rather than cancelled. I want to talk to you about Nigerians in the diaspora and what we witnessed during these protests that happened in Nigeria. They were replicated all over the world by Nigerians who also helped to project a favorable image of our country in all their various endeavors. We've actually gotten accustomed to hearing Nigerians being praised for anything they decide to turn their hands to. Indeed, President Buhari, in his Independence Day, Nigeria at 60 speech, really made a point of that, the excellence of Nigeria's spirit, and also diaspora remittances. So it's just not some kind of PR job or Nigerians being interested in politics in the diaspora. They go and they work hard, earn hard currency, and remit it back home. We get in diaspora remittances $5.8 billion per quarter. This is the first time since 2008 that COVID-19 has managed to dent that and drop it down to about $3 billion per quarter. This all speaks volumes to me about Nigerians in the diaspora. What does this say to you, and how can we harness that huge resource that we have?
Thank you for that question. You know, I have said somewhere else, and not on one occasion, that I believe salvation for Nigeria is going to come from Nigerians in the diaspora. Number one, I've seen this happen in India, where it is when the Indians who had studied and worked in the United States, in the United Kingdom, went back to India, that they then started what I will call the Mumbai revolution, the technological revolution in Mumbai, the former Bombay, and from there it spread and gave a flip to India. We've seen it happen in China. Again, the Chinese from the diaspora now came back home and they were given a breathing space. Now, the Nigerians in diaspora, fortunately, are still immune, not completely, but immune from the virus of ethnicity that we talk about at home and that we use to derail the brains that operate within Nigeria. The Nigerians in diaspora, fortunately, are immune from that. And I pray and hope that they continue to be immune from that. What is now likely to happen is that as the volume of the Nigerians in diaspora gets larger and they start coming back home, I suspect that their impact on the Nigerian political, social, and economic scene will be sufficiently large enough to overwhelm the negativism that we get in Nigeria. You've made reference to their financial input into Nigerian development, and that's massive. I suspect that government is going to try and look for a way to tap into that financial inflow. I hope government won't succeed. But there's a former Nigerian finance minister who actually has drawn an alert into how the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Ministry of Finance had tampered with that capital inflow from the Nigerians in the diaspora, such that that money again was being sent back abroad while the government releases only the naira value. I'm not an economist, so I couldn't really understand the alarm that he was raising. But there's something to watch out there. But, you know, I'm happy at their contribution to the End SARS movement. Even if you cow those at home, you won't cow those abroad. And they know that if this End SARS movement yield positive results, it will be to their own advantage as well. And to that extent, I recognize them, I salute them, I encourage them to continue. And as I said, if the youth at home gets cowed, I hope they keep that hope alive.
Right, real quickly as we wrap up in about a minute or two, sir, I want you to assess the state of the union, because somebody wrote in an article that this NSAS protest showed that it was a tale of two nations in one, you know, and the North, some people in the North were saying they wanted SARS, in the South it was NSAS. Northern governors said they wanted SARS, in the South it was NSAS. And it's like a tale of two nations in one. What's your take on this?
I understand that. I think, unfortunately, it was misrepresented and misinterpreted. Both the North and the South want security. The South identified the source of their aches and pains. The North identified the source of their own aches and pains, which are not the same as the one in the South. To me, that should not have become an excuse to read ethnicity into it. And this is part of what we're talking about in restructuring. If the South did not want SARS, and quite legitimately, and the North wanted SARS, quite legitimately, the North should have had SARS while the South will abolish it because of the impact differently. But it is security that both parties wanted. But trust troublemakers, trust politicians, trust ne'er-do-wells to then use that as an excuse to drive a wedge between the youth in the North and the youth in the South. But have they succeeded in driving a wedge among the quote-unquote people going after their own palliatives? Have they managed? Have they succeeded? Now, the street in the South and in the North are now united in retrieving all those goods in the palliatives. So to some extent, the street, both in the South and in the North, finally saw that the politicians were simply trying to use them for their own purposes, and they rejected that. That's why I said earlier on, I hope the politicians have learned their lesson, that they may succeed just for a while before the eyes and the ears of the youth get opened, that they have a common enemy and that they should work hand in hand to address these issues.
On that note, Prof, we would like to thank you very much for joining us this morning on The Morning Show and for always honoring our invitation. Thank you.